Hey, everybody. This is Nancy A. Shenker, also known as the Geezerproofer. And I am recording today from East Hampton, New York, a house that I've had for a little over 30 years, and I refer to it as my place of peace. This is actually the first time that I'm recording an episode from here, so I hope our Wi-Fi holds up. And as I said to Amy Goober, my guest today, I'm doing the newscaster thing because I was out at the pool and I ran in to put a little makeup on and get ready for the podcast. And I threw a sweatshirt on over my bathing suit, and I am wearing bathing suit bottoms, which I made sure I strategically placed the camera so that I still look somewhat professional. So this summer, on the podcast, my theme has really been what I'm calling Hot Woman's Summer, because this is the first summer, the summer of 2024, that I haven't had to take care of an aging parent, plan a wedding or a baby shower, have other obligations or things that I perceived as obligations. So this is, as Seinfeld said, the summer of George. This is the summer of Nancy. And something that I'm really stressing throughout all of my episodes is as we get older, it's really, really important that we learn to be beezers, or that we stay beezers, people who be in the moment, be relevant, be curious, be active, as opposed to geezers, which you could be at any age. And a geezer is basically somebody who just is stuck and afraid to move forward. So that is a great lead in to this week's guest, Amy Goober, who I actually met at a gathering of women of a certain age that was hosted by Diana Place, who has also been a guest on the podcast. So welcome, Amy. You are probably the second or third coach that I've had on my podcast. And as you and I talked about in our pre-call, I'm always a little skittish about booking coaches because I find them to be very woo-woo, like, all about manifestation and vision boarding and, hoping for your best life. But you said something to me when we met that, like, the good bells went off, where you said you were an action coach. So tell our audience a little bit about what it is that you mean by that and how you may be different from other coaches, especially the woo-woo variety.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me and having me on your podcast. I am definitely not woo-woo. I've never used that phrase to describe myself, nor do I think anybody else would. I'm very concrete and very results driven. So I'm probably quite a ways away from that. But what I do, I am an action coach, which if you've never heard of it, that's fine, because I created it. I made it up. Because I didn't really want to be a life coach in that way, because I work with women, and I think most women are pretty happy with their lives, right? I mean, they've created it in a certain way. But what I do is try to help women think about themselves and what they want. And I believe that women are very other oriented. It's natural for us to think about and care about and put our resources toward other people. It comes very naturally. What doesn't come naturally, in my experience, is when we ask ourselves, what do we want? And then how do we get there? Which is exactly what you were talking about. How do you move forward and get sort of unstuck? So as an action coach, I help women with tactics and strategies to physically move forward, or emotionally move forward, or psychologically move forward in one thing at a time that really matters to them. And I have a program called Drive Your Life, which I created, which is a 5-step process. So you're not going to get lost in the woo-woo. You're on step 1, you're on step 2, and we do a whole thing about where did you start and where are you now. And so I think it's really important for women, especially who are so naturally multitaskers, most of us, to narrow it down to one thing, one area in your life, something that you want to explore or improve, and put your energies toward that. And I think then you can gain a lot more traction and see better results.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on when you talk about women being other oriented. And I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about, especially as I'm living this summer of Nancy, have gone in the Wayback Machine to say, well, who was I as a little girl? And my older brother and I were just delighting our relatives with a story about how I once dragged my older brother out in a snowstorm and he had to drag me back to the house because even though I had this like aura of fearlessness, at the end of the day, I really was kind of an obedient little girl. And you look at the girls, we did things for our mothers, and we in school we were like the teacher's assistants, whereas the boys of that era, and I think it's changed a little bit, but like we just grew up in an era where we were trained to be nurses or teachers when we grew up, which are both helping other oriented professions. And we never really were pushed to say, well, I remember once asking my mother when she was in her 80s, I said, if you had to do all over again, what career would you have chosen for yourself? And she couldn't even go there. She just said, well, it was a different time. I didn't have options. I did what I did and I made the best of it. But yeah, I think that for those of us who grew up in the 60s, 70s, to some extent 80s, we didn't have as many options as young women growing up today. So in some ways we have to do double duty. Have you found that at all? Where a lot of women have done things out of a sense of obligation or expectation, as opposed to saying, well, what is it that would bring me joy?
And I think there's less intentionality with what you're talking about. Things just came our way and we just did them. And so I think that, again, it comes back to feeling comfortable asking yourself and putting some effort toward yourself, focusing on yourself. And I think part of that is acknowledging what we already have inside. So I do a whole exercise in this Drive Your Life program. And in almost every single workshop I give, which is, what do you already have inside, right? Because we're all searching for, we got to take this course, and we got to take this class, and we got to read this book. It's all good. Right. But what do we already have? Like, what are we walking around with 24/7 that we already have?
Yeah, I've had two guests on my show who were both engineers who then started writing erotica for women over 50. So they didn't just wake up one day and say, I want to write books about naked people. They probably always had that creative streak inside them that was finally liberated when they reached a certain stage of their life.
Right. And my theory is the way to find out what you already have inside is to look back and see what are the things you've done in your life and what are the skills and traits that translates to. So if you said, oh, I was the president of the PTO, or, when my kids were little, and you forgot about that because you're, 20 years later, well, what does that translate into? That's determination, that's social skills, right? That's organization, all these things. We forget about all these great things we've done and what the skills and traits are that we still have. Because as I like to say, nobody comes in the middle of the night and slurps your traits out of you. Right. Right. I opened my first business when I was 26, which was a cake bakery. And I had no business experience. I had no bakery experience, but I knew how to decorate cakes. But, at 26. And so what are the skills and traits? Brave, right? Determined, focused. So do I not have that anymore? At 64, you do.
But did it bring you joy? I think that's also a key question. A client said to me the other day, and she was spot on. She said, writing brings you joy. I'm like, yeah, writing always brought me joy, but I didn't do it because there was no way to make a living doing it. And I was balancing out my passion with practicality. And, writing content didn't exist as a profession back then. So I had to wait like 50 some odd years until my passion and my profession converged. So do you ever have people who say, oh, I'm really good at this and I used to do it, but I can't stand it?
Well, I think that can happen. And what I feel like the sweet spot is doing something that you're really good at, that you love. And then the third one is that you can make money at if it's for business, right? So there's a lot of people out there that are doing things they like, but they're not necessarily good at it, right? Or they're doing things they're good at, but they don't necessarily like it. And to your point, I think that we don't ask ourselves enough, what do we like? You're calling it brings you joy. And I'm saying, what do we like? So when I work with women, sometimes I'll say to them, what do you like? They don't even know in any category what they really like, because we're so used to saying whatever you want, right? Someone says, where do you want to go for dinner? Where do you want to go? Look, let's face it. You do know where you want to go, but your first thing you say is, I don't know, wherever you want, whatever you want. We've sort of lost the muscle to really ask ourselves, what do we want? And then verbalize it.
Yeah. And my daughters don't even believe, because, they know that growing up, I would often defer to the majority. And now when I say, I really don't care whether we have sushi or Mexican food, they'll go, no, what are you really in the mood for? And I'll say, if I was really in the mood for sushi, I would tell you that. Like, I'm now at a point in my life where when I say it doesn't really matter, I really mean it doesn't really matter. Right. Like if something really matters, I've become very vocal. Again, it's only taken me 60 odd years to be able to say, no, I'm sorry, that's not my jam. When girlfriends invite me to go places or guy friends, I go, that's wonderful. Like you do you, but like, I don't want to camp out on the ground with mosquitoes. You have a glamper, I'm in, but like, no, this is just, and that's not to say that I don't like, in fact, this week's episode that just aired, episode 33, is about my hot woman summer. And one of the things that I'm recommending to people is that they do at least one thing this summer that they really don't want to do, that scares the shit out of them, that they have a million excuses why not to do it. This is certainly not like in the same category as skydiving, but I may be going to visit Iowa, which those people who know me know that like I'm a total bougie city mouse. So the fact that I'm going to Des Moines and Cedar City, someplace in Iowa, going to an I-state because my social media manager is there. And I'm like learning to experiment at this stage of my life and no longer say, no, I don't like broccoli. I'm never going to eat broccoli.
Right.
I like broccoli if it's prepared a certain way. And, people who get older and become absolutists. I won't do this. I can't do this. I call it the handcuffs in your head. So do you have like a really good case study or success story where you coach somebody who was stuck and in a place of inaction, and then they went on to do something amazing without violating any confidences?
Yeah, there are many. The one that comes to mind first, as you're asking me, is there was a client that I had. She happened to be in that group, the Drive Your Life group program, and we don't even always know what it is we want to work on, right? So that's part of the process. But she was very smart. She was a lawyer, very accomplished, right? And her kids had left the nest, let's just say, right? Were in college. And she had also battled an illness. So, there was that element to it, but she was better. And she found herself like sitting on the couch every day. There's no more stuck than that, right? And we know she's smart, she's accomplished, she was married, she kind of had all the elements, and she couldn't understand why she wasn't doing anything with it. And we went through the process, which is a multi-step process, as I told you. And by the end of the, let's say 8 weeks of the program, she was volunteering for not one, but 2 organizations and had reestablished a love that she had for jewelry making. So she was in a jewelry making class. Now, that may not sound, she wasn't, on a rocket ship to Mars, but for somebody that was sitting on the couch, right, to then be out in the world and really, really contributing in 2 different areas and then doing something that was for her, that's a huge transition in a number of weeks, right? A huge change.
And I think the real question too, and it varies, you and I have had this conversation, there are women who still have to make money. Women who are divorced, widowed, do not have that second income coming in.
Right.
Women are living longer.
Mm-hmm.
So poverty among older women, it's one of the highest poverty groups right now in America, is women of color over 50, over 60. Mm-hmm. So A lot of women who start businesses or pursue passions are doing it as hobbyists. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but that is the piece. And I speak to I coach some women on personal branding or social media. And one of the key questions I always ask is, where does making a living, where does making money factor in to what you're choosing? Because very often you have to make those trade-offs based on when your rent payment is due or whether you have health issues and have to pay for insurance. And it's just the reality of women living to 100 and not being bankrupt or poor. And again, if someone's pursuing something as a hobby, there's nothing wrong with that. God bless if their spouse, significant other, parent is supporting them. But when women have to make money, there are different trade-offs and different decisions. Like, I have a colleague, friend who, was starting small when she moved her business to Arizona. And she realized that, she wants to be able to afford a great place to live and afford great dinners out and can't really be relying on a man. So she's had to reimagine her business so that she is, as a lot of women say, is thinking big, is not thinking small. Well, and so where does profitability factor into your system?
Well, I think there's a lot of life can be broken into the have tos and the want tos, right? So we have to have a place to live. We have to put food in our mouths, right? We have to have health care potentially and those things. So those are the have tos. So that has to be your very first priority, right? So that is the initial focus. And then there's the want tos, which, like you said, are the hobbies or travel or things we want to enrich our lives with. So for women with the have tos, they have to work and they have to find profitability. They have to, right? That's what they have to do.
And that's probably 50 to 70% of today's population, because that's what the divorce rate is. And that doesn't even factor in widowhood. So yeah, it would be a beautiful thing. I remember my daughter once saying to me, "You should have stayed in corporate life." And I said, if I stayed in corporate life, I would have probably aged out at, I left corporate life at 48, but I would have aged out. I would have been put out to pasture in my 50s because I work in marketing, which tends to skew much younger. And I've seen what's happened to a lot of my friends. I mean, not to get off on that whole tangent, but that is a reality. So at least having my own business for the last 21, 22 years, to some extent, I have been able to control my destiny. But that is something that I think women of a certain age need to talk about more often, because if you believe social media, everybody is a girl boss and everybody has an awesome business. And, you're not looking at their bank statements to say, whoa, she's like $200,000 in debt. Like, this is not a business. This is a very expensive hobby.
Right. That is so funny, because when I started my bakery, 100 years ago, and my mother at one point said, if you're not making money, it's an expensive hobby. So that's very interesting. But I do think the other thing about entrepreneurship is it takes a while to establish and to make money. So, I mean, I started one business at 53, and this business I have now, I started at 60. So if you're going to start these things later, which I applaud and I support, right? It's going to take you a little while to get going to bring in the income. And not everybody can do that either, right? A lot of women are working and they do this on the side.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. Suzanne Noble, who was also one of my guests, she actually has a business training people 50 and older on how to be entrepreneurs. And to your point, it's not for everybody.
Right.
And, if you find that you're not great at entrepreneurship, get another gig. I remember a couple of years ago, my business had slowed down dramatically, and I applied for and got a job at a retail store. Because all right, well, if nothing else, I'll have a paycheck coming in. And there's no shame in that.
No, and I think I work with a lot of empty nesters also. And I think what happens there is that women find themselves with they feel a lack of, let's call it, purpose or direction, right? And their kids are off living their lives, which is what they're supposed to do. But you can feel rejected and hurt and empty, and some of your friends move away, and this one's watching their grandchildren. And so at that point, that's a great opening for entrepreneurship if you've got it in you, right? Because now you've got the time. And so that is a great door to open, or like you said, find a job with a paycheck and then have your passions be your extra stuff, your want tos. So there's a lot of options. And I think the women start to see the door closing as they get older. And my whole thing is about expanding your circle, because we really all have two choices at this point. You either contract or expand, right? You contract your life and your world, or you expand it.
Right.
And
so either Beezer or Beezer, to use my terminology.
Right. So I'm always I do all these workshops on connections, what to say after hello, because we're kind of rusty, right? When you're young, you meet people. Maybe if you go to college, you're surrounded by peers. As we get older, we're rusty, right? Where are we going to meet these people and how are we going to meet them? And so I'm a big fan of expand your world. It could be little steps. One thing you go to at your public library, one thing, 1 hour seminar, one little thing, or you go to your local coffee shop and you say hello to one person. This doesn't mean you're going to find your best friend in a minute, but so I'm all about helping women expand their world and believing they can. And I think that speaks to all of this.
And how do you distinguish, you talked about the woman who had couch lock, as they say in the cannabis world, I have images of that person like sinking deeper and deeper into their couch. Yeah. But how do you distinguish between somebody who's just stuck and confused and somebody who really is like legitimately clinically depressed? Have you ever encountered that? And, what do you recommend for somebody who just cannot get off that proverbial couch?
Right. I mean, when I work with people, we do a couple sessions and I can usually tell if it's something that, action coaching is going to help or not. And maybe we start working and we see, and I'll be the first one to say, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, right? I'm going to give you tactics and strategies and support and accountability and all this. So you bring up a good point, and I don't think we can always know right away. But if these things don't work, then they may need, some more counseling or something like that. And if people are, many people have a therapist and they're working with me, and I'm like, fabulous.
Exactly. And then the other thing they probably need is like a good gynecologist who can take a look at their hormone levels and their blood sugar levels, because the medical community is now discovering that a lot of women's moods in later life are tied to hormonal imbalances. Absolutely. The same way young girls, when they get their period for the first time, are prone to fits of crying and rage. I'm on the board of an organization, joinsos.org, and we're actually doing a program on the 27th specifically around physical and mental health and the various stages of life, because we're just learning as a society about how hormone fluctuations affect women in later life. And what you may be feeling is just depression, or the fact that you ate a pan of brownies the night before and aren't feeling good about your body. It could actually be related to something chemical that is treatable. Absolutely. So again, not to get off on that tangent, because that's not what you do for a living, but it is a complex issue. But I love what it is that you're doing, Amy, because and this is why we bonded at that event, because we're both like Action Jackson kind of people. I did write a book with 2 co-authors called Manifestation for Skeptics, because I do believe that you have to have the dream, but then you have to marry the dream with, as you said, the baby steps and the self-analysis to actually make that dream become a reality. So what else would you like to, in terms of, your base of knowledge and your base of work, which is super impressive, what else, if you are feeling stuck as a woman, obviously, other than reaching out to you, and I'll give you a chance in a minute to give out all your contact information, but what are some, you talked about like kind of looking back at the things that you used to like to do and the person you used to be. Are there any other steps that you could take like right now, as soon as you stop listening, to kind of get out of your own head and get moving?
Yes, definitely. I think it's all about breaking things down into small steps. So if one of your goals is to have more friends, as I said, you're not going to walk out your door and a friend is standing there, but what are the small steps you can do? And I mentioned a few, but it could even just be joining a Facebook group for your town and seeing what they're up to. I mean, there's so much. Online is a door opener in some ways and a door closer in other ways. So I really think it's, what can you do? What is within your power? What do you feel, what can you do? Because again, I also think life, is very much broken into the things you can control and the things you can't control. So I'm trying to help women focus on what are the things you can control. I can get dressed, I can put some lip gloss on, and I can go walk to the coffee shop. Right? I can look at my phone or look in my address book, and I can call one friend every single week, someone I haven't spoken to. Small steps just to reach out and open your world, and maybe research. What is one fun thing, Nancy would like to do next week or next month? And that feels good, because every small
I mean, I did something as simple as, I did something as simple as learning how to put a link into an Instagram story. And you would have thought that like I was Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos. Right. I felt so accomplished because I was really, and it was hurting my ability to post about my podcast because I didn't know how to do this. Yeah. And it would have been so easy for me to throw in the towel. And it was just really a matter of also finding the right help and the right teacher. So thank you, Alexa at Pod Populi, for really like changing my life. I mean, I wish it was that easy. But I remember talking to a woman when I lived back in New York who said, I really want to lose weight, but I have to have a piece of chocolate every day. And I said, no, you choose to have a piece of chocolate every day. That if she had just swapped out that piece of chocolate for a sugar-free Jolly Rancher or a date or a piece of fruit, she probably would have lost weight and been healthier. But I thought her choice of words was really interesting. I have to, as opposed to I choose to. And that's always the tough thing, is saying, well, wait a second, I could lose 20 pounds by the end of the year, which is one of my goals. I just have to choose to make better decisions every day. Last night, I took myself out to dinner. I was dying to have a skinny margarita or a martini, and I opted to have water. And I saved 400 calories. And this morning when I put on my bikini, I'm like, yes, like I did it. So every day is full of choices.
So those are the steps. It's realizing what you want and what you already have inside, and then making yourself do something that is a small step to move you forward so that you feel good about it. And, every day is a new day, as we say, right?
Awesome. Amy, this has been terrific. Thank you. So if you're thinking of recording your own podcast or being a guest on my podcast, that is a baby step that's actually pretty easy. Just email me at thegeezerproofer@gmail.com, the THEGEEZER proofer @gmail.com. You can also, if you put summer in the subject line, I will send you 100 things you can do this summer to make sure that you have your own hot woman summer, hot man summer, a summer of discovery, a summer of adventure, even just those baby steps. So I record here at Pod Populi, which has locations all around the country. If you're thinking about starting a podcast, trust me, it's easy peasy. I resisted. It was a huge step I took last fall. No regrets. I'm now up to almost 40 episodes with wonderful people like the fantastic Amy Goober. So, Amy, how can people reach you if they need some action this summer?
Yeah. Well, to make it easy, my website is my name. So you can go to Amy Goober, it's GOOBER.com, and you'll see all that I'm offering. I do women's trips, so there's an opportunity to come and travel with us. I do 2 big in-person events in the Boston area each year. And this last one in April, we had women flying in from Florida and Chicago. So you don't have to live here to participate in it. And I have a women's community, and I have people from all over the country in that. So it's really just a matter of connecting. I'm on all the social media. It's my name. So I'm trying to make it really a straight line for people to find me.
Exactly. And just think of the peanut candy, Goober. Which,
yes, right. Goober, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Great candy. Thank you, Amy. I'm so happy to have met you. And for my listeners, you can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow me on Instagram. My handle is the OnSwitch, TheonSwitch, which is my job for profit as opposed to my passion. But come next year, I may actually be spinning off my Geezer Proof brand. So more on that to come. And again, thank you so much, Amy, for coming on my podcast. And remember, boys and girls, no matter how old you are, aspire to be a beezer, not a geezer. Peace out.